Ever find yourself scrolling through Netflix, wondering how on earth they come up with those recommendations for you?
Yeah.
Or maybe you're someone who's looked at a skyscraper and just, like, marveled at the engineering. Like, how does that even stand up?
Right, right.
Well, those are just two examples of the hidden world of mathematicians, which is what we're diving into today.
Okay.
So, to help us decode this world, we're using RoleCatcher.com.
I like it.
And specifically, we're pulling from their career guide, Mathematician.
Okay.
Now, they've also got a bunch of really cool tools on there for job hunting and interview prep, which, no spoilers, we are going to unpack a little bit later in the deep dive.
Cool.
But first, let's answer the big question. What do these mathematical wizards actually do all day?
Yeah, for sure.
What does a day in the life of a mathematician even look like?
Right, because it seems kind of mysterious.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, RoleCatcher, they describe mathematicians as, and I quote, curious explorers of abstract concepts.
I like that.
Yeah, it sounds very, grand, right?
It does.
And it's true. Some mathematicians, they really are all about like pushing the theoretical boundaries of math itself.
Okay.
But, and this is the cool part, they don't just stop at equations on a chalkboard. It's
Right.
not just like an ivory tower kind of thing.
Right.
They apply that knowledge to real world stuff.
Okay, so less about proving theorems in their basement
Mm.
and more about what? What are some real-world applications here?
Well, I mean, you were just talking about Netflix recommendations.
Yeah.
That's algorithms, right? And those are built on some pretty serious math, analyzing what you like to watch and serving up those suggestions. Or think about those skyscrapers we were talking about, making sure that those things can withstand, wind, gravity, earthquakes,
Right.
all that.
That's math.
That's math too.
Okay, so not just Netflix and chill, but buildings that don't fall down.
Exactly.
Got it. So something else that RoleCatcher mentions that I wanted to touch on is this idea of big data.
Mm.
Like, what does that even mean, and what does that have to do with mathematicians?
Yeah, so big data, it's kind of what it sounds like. It's like imagine if you took all the information in the world, just dumped it into a giant swimming pool.
Okay.
It'd be overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
So mathematicians, they're the ones with the floaties and the scuba gear. They're not afraid to dive right in.
Okay.
They create the models and the algorithms to kind of swim through it all and make sense of it.
So they're finding the patterns, the connections, the meaning in this sea of information.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty impressive.
Uh,
I'm not going to lie, it makes me almost wish I paid more attention in calculus class.
well, hey, it's never too late, right?
True. Never too late.
You think about a career change, maybe?
Who knows? Who knows what the future holds?
Ah.
But speaking of careers, RoleCatcher actually gives a pretty good rundown of the kind of degrees that can lead you down this path if you are interested in becoming a mathematician.
Oh, interesting.
And it's actually more diverse than I initially thought it would be.
More diverse? How so?
Yeah, because I always figured it was just, math, end of story.
Right. Just math.
You get your math degree, you're a mathematician.
Right. Well, not anymore, apparently. So, yeah, you've got your classic, your pure mathematics degree.
Okay.
But they also highlight things like, statistics,
Okay.
econometrics, even computer science, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Whoa, hold on. Computer science.
Right.
Well, what's that doing in the mix?
Well, I think it really reflects how, intertwined data analysis and computational modeling are with mathematics now.
Okay.
Mathematicians, they need that kind of interdisciplinary edge to tackle those real-world problems that we were talking about.
So it's not just about being like a math whiz, it's about knowing how to apply those skills across different fields.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because I imagine a lot of those real-world problems don't fit neatly into a textbook, right?
No, absolutely not. And speaking of textbooks, RoleCatcher really emphasizes this idea of continuous learning.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they specifically talk about, even if you've got your bachelor's, they really suggest looking into advanced degrees, diving into research, staying updated on publications in the field.
So even after you've got all those degrees, you're still hitting the books.
Well, yeah, I mean,
It's tense.
that's the thing about math. It's a living field. It's constantly evolving, right?
Right.
But it's not all just like, academic stuff.
Okay.
They emphasize practical experience too. They talk about internships. Thankfully, RoleCatcher, it actually helps you find some of those opportunities too.
Convenient. Very cool. Okay, so let's talk about the skills you actually need for this kind of work, because I think, let's be real, the image of a mathematician can be a little stereotypical, right?
You mean like the lone genius scribbling away on a chalkboard,
Exactly.
muttering about prime numbers?
Yeah, exactly. Like some sort of mad scientist but with numbers.
Right, right.
But RoleCatcher actually paints a very different picture. Like one of the things that they rank really highly in terms of essential skills is active listening, which for a field that's supposedly dominated by numbers, like seems kind of counterintuitive.
Right. Yeah, you'd think it was all about just, being in your head.
Exactly.
But think about it. You're collaborating on research projects. You're explaining complex models to people who aren't mathematicians.
Right.
Like, you've got to be able to listen to do that effectively.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And speaking of communication, RoleCatcher also ranks both speaking and writing really highly, like 61% and 64% importance, to be exact.
Wow. Okay.
So much for the strong, silent genius stereotype.
Right, because you could have the most groundbreaking mathematical discovery, but if you can't communicate it to other people,
Right.
it's kind of useless, isn't it?
Totally, totally. But I will say the skill that really jumped out at me when I was going through this career guide on RoleCatcher was this idea of active learning. And it was ranked 75% in terms of importance, which just seems huge. What does that even mean in the context of mathematics?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in that context, it really means like constantly seeking out new solutions, new ways of looking at things, always adapting to new discoveries, right? I mean, think about those like centuries-old math problems that are still being solved today.
Right.
I mean, that's active learning in action. It's about always pushing the boundaries of what we know and refining our understanding.
So it's not just about what you know, it's about how you continue to learn.
Exactly, yeah.
Which makes sense, again, because it's this constantly evolving field.
That's
Right.
it.
There's always something new to discover.
Always.
Okay, so we talked about the skills, but now let's get into the nitty-gritty of like actually landing a job in this world, because RoleCatcher does not sugarcoat it, let me tell you.
Oh, really?
They call the current job market an automated recruiter lottery, which frankly does not sound like a game I want to play.
Yeah, a lottery. Oh, wow.
It sounds stressful. Talk about pressure.
Yeah.
But this is where those RoleCatcher tools that I mentioned in the beginning come in handy, because they've got this feature called RoleCatcher.capture.
Okay.
And what this does is it basically lets you grab job postings from all over the place. So we're talking LinkedIn, Indeed, all the big ones.
Nice. Very convenient.
Right. And then on top of that, they have this whole system that helps you tailor your resume to actually get past those AI gatekeepers that are like, the bane of everyone's existence right now when you're applying for jobs.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And they do this through a CV analysis tool.
Okay.
And they actually say, quote, instantly reveal the job skill profile to tailor your CV resume, pushing you to the front of the pack.
Wow.
So it's like this whole, you upload your CV or your resume, and it tells you, like, based on the job description, based on what they're looking for, how to really, like, optimize it to make sure that you're actually being seen by a human.
Wow. That's incredibly helpful, I bet.
Yeah.
Especially in today's market. And it's interesting because it really highlights something kind of crucial, right? That even in a field as, like, seemingly objective as math, being able to, like, market yourself effectively, showcase your skills, it's still key.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So important. Okay, so speaking of skills, I think we've only, like, scratched the surface of what mathematicians bring to the table, because beyond the equations and the algorithms, there's this whole other world of problem solving and critical thinking that they do that I don't think people always realize.
Totally. Yeah. It's not just about crunching numbers in isolation.
Right, exactly.
There's so much more to it than that.
So how do those skills, those like problem solving, that critical thinking, how does that translate to other fields? Because you're telling me it's not just about doing math in a vacuum.
Oh, absolutely not. And it impacts fields you might not even imagine. Remember how we were talking about big data before and how that plays into like those Netflix recommendations?
Right.
Well, I mean, those same principles, those same mathematical principles that are being used for something that seems, kind of lighthearted, like that are being used in incredibly important fields like healthcare, finance, I mean, even art and music.
Wait, hold on. Are you telling me even art and music have these like hidden mathematical structures beneath them?
Absolutely. I mean, think about musical harmony, right? Or perspective in a painting.
Okay, yeah.
It all goes back to mathematical ratios, patterns,
That's incredible. I have to admit, I always thought of math as being this like very separate thing from those fields.
Right. Very siloed.
Yeah, like left brain, right brain. They don't mix.
Right. And that's kind of the cool thing about this whole deep dive is like, we get to break down those silos and actually reveal those unexpected connections. And honestly, RoleCatcher, like their whole platform, they have in-depth career guides across a ton of different professions.
That's right.
It's really cool to kind of see how they connect and how skills from one translate to another.
Yeah, it's like that whole saying, everything's connected, but like with careers.
Exactly, exactly.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is, even if like a career in mathematics doesn't sound like your cup of tea, just going through these resources, like looking at the skills, could help you see your own job, your own field, or even just the world around you in a whole new light.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's all about those transferable skills. But getting back to the mathematicians themselves for a second,
Okay.
we were talking about communication and how important that is.
Right.
I imagine explaining some of these complex mathematical concepts, you've really got to like shift your approach depending on who you're talking to, right?
Totally. Like talking to a fellow mathematician is going to be way different from explaining a concept to, I don't know, a group of business execs or something like.
Exactly, yeah. It's
Yeah.
like you've got to find the right language, the right analogies, the right level of detail for each audience, right?
Right.
You need to be able to get to the core of the idea, but without like bogging them down in technical jargon.
Right. Like that old saying, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough yourself.
Right. Exactly. And that's why those communication skills are so crucial for mathematicians. It's not just about being right. It's about making other people see why it matters, you know?
That's a really good point. Now, I'm curious, like, I'm not a mathematician, obviously, but I imagine there are times when you're working on a problem that's so complex, so abstract, that you almost feel like you're the only person who understands what you're even trying to solve.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So, like, how do you stay motivated when you're that deep in the weeds, when it feels like you're kind of on your own out there?
That's a great question, and something, honestly, that a lot of mathematicians, they grapple with at some point.
Yeah.
And I think the key is really just remembering that even the most esoteric, like out there mathematical concepts, they're often rooted in some fundamental truth about the world, you know?
So even when it feels like you're off in your own little universe,
Here.
you're still connected to something much larger than yourself.
Right. And honestly, often that connection, that feeling that you're uncovering some kind of hidden truth, that's what provides the motivation to just keep pushing forward, you know?
That's actually a really beautiful way to think about it. But of course, it's not always like glamorous, right?
Yeah.
I imagine there's plenty of like dead ends and frustrations,
Yeah.
maybe even like the occasional existential crisis when you're dealing with like concepts that challenge the very nature of reality, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There are definitely days when, like, the elegance of mathematics feels a million miles away, and you're just staring at a wall of equations, wondering if you've, totally lost it.
Right.
But even in those moments, there's, like, a thrill to the challenge, It's like
Yeah.
you're a detective, right?
Totally.
You're hunting for clues in this vast, intricate puzzle that is the universe.
I can see why people get hooked on this field.
Yeah.
It's like this constant like mental workout, but in a good way.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's say you've conquered academia, you've honed your skills, you've landed that dream job as a mathematician. Like, what does an average day actually look like? Is it all chalkboards and equations, or is there more variety than we might expect?
That's the thing about this field. There's no such thing as a typical day for a mathematician.
Really?
Yeah, it really depends. I mean, the work you do can vary drastically depending on, what you specialize in, what industry you're in, even just the company culture.
So we could be talking about anything from like someone doing pure research in academia to someone developing algorithms for like self-driving cars.
Exactly. Or, you've got people who are analyzing financial data on Wall Street. Like,
Right.
the range is incredibly broad. And even within those different areas, the tasks that you might be doing on a daily basis, they can be incredibly diverse.
So it's not just like sitting at a desk crunching numbers all day.
Not at all. I mean, you might be collaborating with colleagues on a research project or, presenting your findings at a conference. Some mathematicians, they get to travel to different countries, attend workshops or even work with international teams.
That actually sounds a lot more like social and dynamics than I initially imagined.
Yeah, it can be. And I think, with the rise of remote work and everything too, a lot of mathematicians now, they have the flexibility to work from pretty much anywhere in the world, which adds a whole other layer of variety and excitement to the job.
That's so cool. So really, it sounds like for any aspiring mathematicians listening, like the key takeaway here is to just be open to a wide range of possibilities.
Absolutely. Yeah. Don't limit yourself to like preconceived notions of what a mathematician should be or do. Like embrace that diversity that we were just talking about. Explore your interests and, chart your own path.
Yeah, because ultimately, I feel like the most successful mathematicians, or just successful people in any field, really,
Yeah,
are the ones who are driven by genuine passion for what they're doing and that desire to make a difference in the world.
absolutely. And speaking of making a difference, I kind of want to delve a little bit deeper into this whole idea of the real world impact of mathematics.
Okay, yeah.
We've touched on a few examples, but I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts on how this field is kind of like actively shaping the future, especially when it comes to things like technology and artificial intelligence?
I mean, I think it's safe to say that mathematics is like the driving force behind so many of the technological advancements that we're seeing today.
Yeah.
And especially with like the rise of AI and machine learning, like the role of mathematics is only going to become more important, more central to like everything.
It's true. It's like we're on the verge of this whole new era where mathematical models, algorithms, they underpin everything from, how we interact with our phones to how we solve some of the world's biggest problems.
Like climate change, you're saying.
Yeah, climate change, disease. I mean, people are even using it to look at, poverty, inequality, all these massive issues.
Right.
And that's what makes this field so exciting, right? By pushing those boundaries of mathematical knowledge, you're not just like solving these abstract puzzles in a vacuum. You're literally creating the tools, the solutions that could improve the lives of, potentially millions of people around the world.
So anyone out there who's maybe listening to this and thinks that math is just this like dry, theoretical subject that has no bearing on their everyday life,
Think again.
think again.
Right. It's a field that's brimming with creativity, with innovation, and honestly, just the potential to shape a better future.
I love that perspective. It's not just about numbers, it's about people. But of course, with great power comes great responsibility, right?
Yeah.
And with all this talk of AI and the advancement of these powerful new technologies, I think it's really important to at least acknowledge that there are some ethical considerations that have to be taken, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that's actually where the role of mathematicians becomes even more important because as we develop these incredibly powerful tools, we have to be mindful of the potential consequences.
And make sure that these technologies are being used for good and not for harm.
Right,
Exactly.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It means really thinking through the ethical implications of the work that we're doing every step of the way. So from like that initial research and development phase all the way to how these technologies are actually deployed and used out in the world.
So it's about like wielding those mathematical superpowers responsibly.
Yes, exactly. And that's something that I thought was really interesting that RoleCatcher actually emphasizes in their career guide.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they specifically highlight the importance of ethics in mathematics.
That's really interesting. It's not something that you always think about when you picture like, stereotypical image of a mathematician.
You're right. But like we've been talking about, the work that mathematicians do can have such a ripple effect on society.
Right.
It can be so impactful that we have a responsibility to make sure that that impact is a positive one.
Absolutely. 100%. Okay. So you mentioned earlier that RoleCatcher also offers a ton of resources for career development, things like interview prep, help with building your CV, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Do you think that their platform could be helpful for aspiring mathematicians, like maybe even people who are just starting to think about, okay, what do I want to be when I grow up kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely. I think RoleCatcher is such a valuable resource for anyone at any stage of their career journey.
Okay.
If you're just starting to explore different career options, if you're further along, it doesn't matter. It's a great place to kind of figure out what's out there.
And for those who are interested in mathematics specifically,
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic place to start. Like, they give you that really in-depth information about, here are the skills you need for a math career. Here's the knowledge base you need to have. But then they don't just leave you hanging. They also have all those tools and resources to help you actually develop those skills, connect with potential employers, and navigate that whole, like, job search process, which can be kind of daunting, honestly.
oh, it can be so overwhelming.
It
Really can.
Totally.
It's like having a personal career coach, but like in your pocket.
Right. In a way, yeah. And I think that's something that's really cool, especially like for students who, maybe they don't have a lot of guidance. Maybe they don't have a mentor in their life who's in this field.
Right.
It's like a way to kind of level the playing field and give everyone a chance to succeed no matter, what their background is.
100%. It's all about access, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's something I really like about RoleCatcher's mission.
Me too.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we completely wrap up this deep dive, I wanted to revisit something that we were talking about a little bit earlier, which is this whole idea that mathematics intersects and connects with other fields in these kind of unexpected ways.
Oh, yeah. One of my favorite things to talk about.
I figured.
Yeah.
I mean, what are some examples that come to mind for you, like fields where math's influence might not be super obvious at first glance?
So many. But one that I always find really interesting is linguistics.
Linguistics. Okay, so you're talking about like the study of language.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you think about language and it seems so like messy and organic, right? But underneath it all, there's this really beautiful structure, this deep structure that you can actually analyze and understand using mathematical principles.
So we're talking about things like grammar and syntax,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But it gets even like deeper than that. Like mathematicians and linguists, they use all sorts of tools like set theory, probability, even game theory to study things like how people learn language, how language evolves over time, and even like what meaning is.
Wow, that's wild. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's a trip.
That's really cool.
And that's just one example.
Right.
I mean, there are so many fields that are like secretly driven by math.
So really, it's that idea that math is so much more than just like the numbers, the equations. It's a way of thinking. It's a problem-solving tool. It's like this whole other lens with which to view and understand the world around us.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. And that's really what makes it such a powerful and enduring field, you know? It's not just about memorizing formulas, it's about like that way that you think.
Well said. Okay, so I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We've gone from like the really practical aspects of like how do you launch a career in mathematics
Right.
all the way to like the really big picture stuff,
Yeah, the big questions.
right? Like the profound impact that mathematics has on our world
Yeah.
and even those ethical considerations that come with like this power that mathematicians are kind of wielding.
Absolutely, yeah, because it's a powerful field.
It is.
Yeah.
So for anyone listening, I think the big takeaway, and we've said this in a bunch of different ways, is that mathematicians aren't just, number crunchers. They are creative problem solvers. They are skilled communicators. And really, they are architects in a lot of ways of the future.
I love that. Architects of the future.
Yeah. And throughout all of this, we've also explored how platforms like RoleCatcher can be so valuable.
Absolutely.
For anyone who is interested in, breaking into this exciting field or even just wants to learn a little bit more about what mathematicians do.
For sure.
So to our listeners, like keep exploring, keep asking those questions. And I think the big thing is keep that spark of mathematical curiosity alive because you never know what you'll discover.
Yeah, you really don't. I mean, some of the biggest breakthroughs in the field have come from people who are just like messing around, you know?
Following their curiosity.
Exactly. Having fun and then boom, they stumble onto something incredible.
It's true. The more you learn about anything, really, you realize how much you don't know.
It's a little humbling.
It is. So for our listeners who are maybe listening to this being like, wow, okay, I wish I was better at math or I missed my calling to be a math whiz, where do you even begin? If you're interested in like unpacking this massive, massive field, where do you start?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, honestly, I think the best place to start is just like small. Think about like what actually interests you about math? What sparks your curiosity?
Yeah.
Is it like the elegance of prime numbers, or are you more interested in like the real world applications of data science, or like we were talking about, maybe it's the way that math underpins like music or something like that?
Yeah.
Find that like one little point of intrigue and then just kind of dive in from there.
I love that. Follow your curiosity. You don't have to become an expert in everything overnight.
Exactly. Like, don't bog yourself down trying to like understand everything about every field of mathematics all at once.
Right.
Just like give yourself permission to explore, ask questions, and like most importantly, just enjoy the journey.
Totally. Because at its core, that's what mathematics is all about, right? It's the joy of discovery. It's the thrill of like solving a puzzle. It's the satisfaction of like, aha, I get it. I understand something new about the world around me.
100%, yeah. Whether you're, a seasoned mathematician who's been doing this for years, or you're just starting to kind of, like you were saying, appreciate the beauty of numbers, I think that sense of wonder, it's what connects us all.
Totally. Well said.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the world of mathematicians.
I've had so much fun.
Me too. We've covered so much ground from, like I said, the practicalities of, okay, I want to have a job in this field. How do I make that happen?
Mm.
To like really big picture questions about the impact that mathematics has had and continues to have on our world.
And we busted some stereotypes along the
We
way.
did. We revealed that mathematicians are not just these like, solitary figures hunched over their calculators, that they're creative thinkers, they're problem solvers, they're communicators, and they really are in a lot of ways shaping the future with their work.
Totally. And we also got to talk about like how cool RoleCatcher is as a resource.
Yes. For anyone who's interested in, even just dipping their toe into this world, we highly recommend checking it out.
Huh.
But regardless of whether you're using RoleCatcher or you found some other avenue in, I think if there's one big takeaway from this whole conversation that we hope you walk away with, it's to never lose that spark of mathematical curiosity, because you just never know what you'll discover when you embrace that sense of wonder.
100%. It's a big, wide world of numbers out there. Go explore.
Yes. This has been The Deep Dive, and we'll catch you next time.